Hello, everybody. How's it going? I hope to not have to keep doing these. I didn't do one for a few weeks since yesterday's, and I don't really love doing them. But here I am. So the main thing I want to discuss today is that I did make a mistake. There was a company that had a deferred PDUFA. It happened a few weeks ago. It was SPPI, and it happened on October 24th was their PDUFA date, and they got an email from the FDA on October 23rd telling them that they were not going to act on the PDUFA date. Now, there are a lot of things about this situation that are different than Lysocell. So I'm going to talk about what makes it different, but there isn't one important similarity, or could be a similarity. So first of all, SPPI is a non-priority, non-breakthrough designation drug, and the inspection had to be done in South Korea. South Korea has a 2-week mandatory quarantine for any incoming American. Clearly, that's not the same thing as an inspection in Houston. That being said, the similarities are, we know as of yesterday, they have not inspected Houston, and the PDUFA date is in 2 weeks from now. So if you believe the FDA that they're requiring an inspection for Houston, and they're not going to be able to do it in the next 2 weeks, you have to also believe that with SPPI, they knew 2 weeks before they were not going to inspect South Korea. So why did they notify them the day before? I have a few thoughts about this. I don't know the answer. First thought is SPPI is lying. It's possible. I heard that it's not exactly the most reputable company. And they might have had a good inclination many weeks before that they weren't going to be approved on time. They might not have got a formal notice until the day before the PDUFA date. And this could be the same thing with Bristol Myers. The second possibility is that the FDA didn't know what they were going to do with SPPI, that they debated internally up until the end and then decided we are going to defer. My current school of thought is that that's exactly what they're doing with Bristol right now, that they are trying to decide whether they should approve this on the PDUFA and then defer the inspection to after COVID, or maybe in the next week or two do some sort of hybrid inspection. Though if they were going to do that, I think they would have done that in the last few weeks. It's hard for me to handicap what the odds are that the FDA decides to defer an inspection in the next 2 weeks and approve on PDUFA. Before yesterday, I did not view this vehicle as a gamble. I had high confidence in both of these drugs being approved on time, even during COVID. I simply don't know how to handicap it. I think it's much greater than the market is currently pricing in, but 50% probably seems too high for approval on time, given Bristol Myers is apparently in the dark about whether or not the FDA is willing to defer inspection. So I pull the 50% that I said yesterday, and I would probably say I'm more like a 25% chance of being approved on time. But again, I have no idea. At this point, when you have probabilities that aren't, I did in a previous video, I talked about 75, 85, 95, and I think it's very hard for humans to discern between a 75% and a 90% probability. In my mind, when I invest in things, I think it's likely to happen, or I think it's unlikely to happen. If I think something's likely to happen, then I invest. If I think something is unlikely to happen, then I don't invest, unless it's a huge return and you play for like a lotto ticket. This investment has obviously turned more into the latter, a lotto ticket, than the former, something that I was highly likely of succeeding on. And to be clear, even when the stock was $2 before they inspected Bothell, I was in the highly likely camp, not lotto ticket. Just because it was trading at $2 and we're going to be worth $9, the market was pricing it as a lotto ticket, but I didn't believe that was what I was investing in. Today, I have no idea. So I'm not selling it. I am going to make it a little bit smaller, but I mean, mind you, this position was in the large double digits for me, and it will remain in the double digits for me now. So most people have 1, 2, 3% of their portfolios in this. And you have to have context when something's being resized. It's still being resized to a much greater than a 10% position in my portfolio. Let's see what other questions I have here. So let's talk about why they would possibly inspect Bothell and then not send somebody into Houston. How could this happen? So the only two possibilities I could come up with are that they found something wrong in Bothell and they did not decide to send someone to Houston, or that they do not have the manpower to send people to Houston right now. COVID has taken the resources from the vector inspectors, and they're inspecting, vaccine sites instead of inspecting Houston. I have a hard time believing either of these are true. As I've said before, Bothell was just inspected in the middle of October. So I don't know why they would be able to inspect Bothell in the middle of October and then not be able to immediately send someone to Houston. I also think that based on Bristol's commentary on the call, they did not mention resource allocation issues with the FDA this time. They did mention it a few months ago, but this time they specifically said it was about the safety and security of the FDA employees. I also don't think that it's a result of Bothell having a terminal inspection. I really think that Bristol would have disclosed that there was a problem with the ongoing review, or a potential problem, and that's why the FDA has not gone down to Houston. In fact, the actual language, as we've said many times yesterday, from Samet on the call was that everything is going very well and they're very happy with the review process. So I can't figure out why they haven't gone to Houston yet, and more importantly, why they would then be able to go in the future. That's concerning to me. And the school of thought that if we get to the PDUFA date and they defer, then we still have the 5 or 6 weeks after that to finish this. I just don't subscribe to it, because if they weren't willing to do a virtual inspection in these 2 weeks between now and the PDUFA, or defer the inspection, why would FDA then decide internally between the 3rd week of November and the end of December that they're then going to do a virtual inspection, and that they're then going to defer an inspection? I think we could all agree that they definitely won't waive the inspection post the PDUFA date and pre-December 31st. If they were going to waive the inspection, they would do it at the PDUFA date. So then you have to believe that they just changed their mind and they either do a virtual inspection, but they missed the PDUFA date, or they decide that even though COVID is ramping up in Houston, that they are willing to take the risk and send employees there. Or you think that they had resource issues, and because of the resource issues, they'll then be able to get someone into Houston at the second half of November or in December. I put all of these things at rather low odds. So what you're really banking on is that in the next 2 weeks, the FDA decides to either virtually inspect or they waive. I still think there's a really good possibility of that. When they deferred on SPPI, they deferred on an international inspection for a non-priority, non-breakthrough designation drug. And it previously even had problems. They had to pull their NDA last year for manufacturing problems. And it's not as remotely as important of a drug. But they did do it. They did defer on a PDUFA. I think it's a pretty bad look for them to say we can't get on a plane to Houston to approve a life-saving breakthrough designation oncology drug, and we're going to delay it indefinitely because we don't want to put ourselves at risk while people are dying of cancer. I just don't think that that's the decision that a top dog at the FDA is going to make when we're not even talking about the inspection of the main facility. That's already been inspected. This is just an ingredient that goes into the main facility. So why does Bristol say that the FDA told them they have to inspect? Well, someone did, I shouldn't say we, someone did a consulting call a couple months ago with a consultant in the industry. He doesn't work for an actual pharmaceutical company. He works in helping them get drugs approved. And I think I mentioned this in a previous video, but he knows of 5 companies that got letters 60 days prior to their PDUFA date that said that the FDA can't inspect and they want you to acknowledge that they can't inspect. And there's, a chance that we're going to miss your PDUFA as a result. And all 5 of those companies got approved. This is all pre-August. So it's like one got approved in August, one got approved in July, and I think the other ones were in the thick of COVID. There's a very good possibility that Bristol Myers is not being told everything by the FDA, and that the FDA still has no idea what they're planning on doing with this application. In fact, the language that Samit used in yesterday's call was, as we previously told you, the FDA has said they need to inspect both facilities. It's unknown whether or not that means the FDA has reiterated that to them as recently as yesterday or the week before. In fact, I think everything about yesterday's call and disclosures was far from definitive. We think we're going to miss this PDUFA date. And people that spoke to Bristol Myers yesterday on the phone got a similar view from investor relations that we shouldn't come away with they're going to miss the PDUFA date. I just don't think Bristol Myers knows, or if they do know, they're trying to cover their ass because it's in their best interest to cover their ass. So I'd be far from shocked if this is approved in 2 weeks. And that's the reason why I'm maintaining such a big position, because I think it is more than possible. I just don't know if it's likely. So likely would be, greater than 50% chance. Possible would be 25 to 50% chance. And I'm probably in that bucket. Let's see some questions I have here. Didn't BMY say they would limit disclosure regarding Lysocell? They probably disclosed Washington because they're confusion, but just didn't disclose Texas. I don't know what that question is. They did say that they would only definitively tell us updates if the drug was approved, the drug was rejected, or they were going to delay their PDUFA date. And we should expect the next update in their 10Q on earnings. I think that was a normal time period for them to tell us an update. And I think that given the fact that the world knew that they inspected Washington as a result of the sleuthing, that they had to tell us that Texas wasn't inspected. In fact, I'm more confused, and this is bullish, that after Bothell was inspected and they knew Houston wasn't scheduled, I'm more surprised they didn't alert the market in the last 2 weeks about this, if they thought there was a good chance the PDUFA was going to be missed, because they knew the market knew Bothell was inspected, and they were in possession of information that Houston wasn't even scheduled. So you could say it's bullish that they didn't think that was material enough to alert us, because they are feeling confident that they're still going to be approved by the PDUFA date. And yesterday was simply a fact disclosure that they hadn't been inspected in Houston. They're not scheduled. And the FDA told them previously that they had to be inspected. Does this plant produce other stuff that has been inspected by the FDA previously? That's a great question. As far as I'm aware, the Houston facility, even though it's not owned by Bristol Myers, it has never been inspected for a commercial product yet. And that's why this is so risky, and the reason why the FDA is demanding an inspection. If it was previously confirmed for a commercial output, then the FDA definitely would have waived, I think, this inspection a long time ago. That's the issue. It's never had a commercial approval yet. Now, Lonza, the supplier, which has never been confirmed by Bristol, but it's like 99% likely it's Lonza, is a very reputable international drug manufacturer. So the FDA can lean on that if they're willing to defer. Oh boy, Kid Dynamite is asking me a question. If BMY isn't having clear, active discussions with the FDA about plans to remedy inspection issues, isn't that more bearish than bullish? I don't know if that's true. They didn't tell us that they hope to resolve the inspection on the call, nor should they. I mean, they have nothing to benefit from trying to mislead or push the CVR holders into thinking this is going to be approved, and then they miss it, and then they get sued. If I was Bristol Myers, I would, and this is what the IR guy told me the one time I spoke to him. He said, all we're doing is telling you the facts. The facts are Bristol Myers told us they need to inspect, and they haven't inspected. Anything else you want to read into, that's fine. And he refused to tell me anything about the nuances of, this is back in September, if Bristol Myers told them, if the FDA told Bristol Myers, yes, we're not scheduled, but we do plan on coming at some point in October. He just wouldn't give us any disclosures about any of their conversations. So of course the FDA is talking to Bristol Myers, whether it's about, someone asked me, wouldn't they be in labeling discussions right now? Well, yes, I think they probably are in labeling discussions, because you could be in labeling discussions pending this one inspection of a supplier, so that once that happens or gets waived, you can approve. Would Bristol Myers tell us they're in labeling discussions? No. I mean, again, what is this? This is an immaterial drug to Bristol Myers. In fact, if this drug were to get rejected, they would have a higher NPV than if it was approved based on the $7 billion they're saving. This drug is not worth $7 billion to Bristol Myers. It's not even worth close to $7 billion to Bristol Myers. So it's immaterial. And in a normal conference call without this CVR, it wouldn't even come up. It wouldn't matter. Matt, to clarify, the consultant who said 5 companies received notice from the FDA 60 days in advance, yet still have approvals, were those in spite of no inspection or inspections occurred? Great question. Some of them had no inspections, apparently. Now, to be clear, these drugs are very different than a CAR T. I don't know the names of the drugs. I do know that they weren't cell gene therapy drugs. That I'm sure of, because those didn't have any approvals from July, August, and earlier. Cell and gene therapy drugs are much more complex with manufacturing, and the inspection and the CMC module in general is the most important part of the approval process. But yes, some of them did not have any inspections, or they might have done them virtually, and they got approved. Richard, disagree with you on the lack of notice to the market, because they had given prior guidance they would give no updates. Yeah, they could say whatever they want. I mean, I could tell you, I'm never going to give you an update about something that is material. And then if a material something comes out and, they decide not to update you, it's still grounds for a lawsuit in the future. So you can make an argument that the only thing material is approval, rejection, and delaying the PDUFA date. I can make an argument that it's pretty material if the market knows that Bothell was inspected, but Texas hadn't even been scheduled, which by implementation, by connecting the dots, we'll go with that, means that there's no way you can get a PDUFA date, on-time PDUFA decision in 2 weeks if the FDA has truly told them that you have to have an inspection for approval. But yes, Bristol Myers clearly wants to not tell us anything, and then be proud of themselves for saying, we've given you more disclosure than we ever give about drugs. Unfortunately, the disclosures we've gotten from Bristol Myers in the last few months have only been negative. They never bothered telling us that Bothell was inspected. Again, do they have to? No, but they could have. Anyway, let me see what else we got here. Are there any 483s at Bothell? That's a great question. And this will blow your mind, but I was told by someone that spoke to someone again, I have no idea if this is true. Someone spoke to Bristol Myers yesterday, and she said that, or the IR apparently said there was a 483, and they haven't responded to it yet. And I guess today is the deadline for a response. I have no idea if that's true. We always thought there'll be 483s, so that doesn't surprise me. I have no idea why that would have came up in a conversation. I don't think it matters. I don't know. I don't know why they waited to the last business day to respond. I think if the 483 was bad, they wouldn't have said the language they said yesterday in the conference call about how they're very happy with how things are going with the FDA. But yes, I'm told there was a 483. That was not as a result of a Freedom of Information Act request. That was a conversation with IR. Third hand, I think I heard it fourth hand. So believe what you want to believe about it. But anyway. Richard is right. They just didn't want to disclose that Texas was virtually inspected or will be waived. Okay. What does vector supplier to Bothell mean? So look, I don't know anything about this stuff. I'm told that a vector supplier would be like, if you're making chicken soup, the chicken soup is being made in Washington and the chicken is made in Texas. You need the chicken to make the chicken soup. So that would be the analogy you would use for how important the vector is to the whole package. So anyway, that's where I'm at. I don't know. Any other questions? There's probably a lot more I could talk about, and I'm sure I'll forget it after I hang up with this call. It's that, there's a lot more unknowns than knowns here. And I don't know what will happen next 2 weeks. I don't know whether or not Bristol Myers knows anything more than we do. I think that the FDA would look terrible if they defer this drug indefinitely. I don't think it is a Me Too drug. I think that the numbers are clear. The post-approval studies of the 2 CAR T drugs in the market show that 2% of the patients have died from side effects, from toxicities. So you can't say that as a result of these centers getting better at administering the CAR Ts, it's reduced the side effect deaths. It hasn't from the post-approval studies. Let's see what else we got here. Well, the question is the vector something basic like an API, something more complex? I'm told it isn't that complex, whatever that means. It is definitely not something like, it's definitely what's ever happening at that facility is nothing like what's happening at Bothell. The Bothell facility and what's in the actual manufacturing of the CAR T is infinitely more complex than the making of the vector. Someone says vector refers likely to the DNA necessary for the cell therapy. Okay. If FDA gives a conditional approval, does that fulfill the CVR requirement? That's a great question. Yes. If it gets approved in November and they say we will do an inspection later, and let's say then the inspection fails and they pull it from the market, I mean, I'm 99% sure that we would still get approval. I'll give you an example. If ozanimod got pulled from the market this week for toxicity, some such side effect deaths, again, 99% sure that we would still get paid. It's conditional on the original approval, not what happens months or years later. All of their Texas statements are prefaced with, as we stated in September, or as we previously disclosed. Yeah, that's a great question. A great comment, Theodore. They have said that, as we've stated in September, or as we prefaced before. So the question then you have to ask yourself, has the FDA updated Bristol Myers that inspection in Texas is necessary? I don't think you can take that to be, law based on the way they're wording their statements now, and based on the fact that why would the FDA send someone into Bothell and then know they can't send someone into Texas? I do want to bring up one other thing that I thought was very odd in yesterday's call, which was originally very bearish to me, and I still don't understand why it happened. In the transcript, I just pulling up the transcript right here. Excuse me. In the transcript, when they were first asked the question, at the end of Samet's statement, he said, "Is there anything you'd like to add, Nadim, if you want to add something, or Giovanni?" Nadim says, "No, I think you covered it all well, Samet. Thanks." And then Giovanni then pipes in and says, "The only thing I want to add," this is Giovanni, "the only thing I would add is, just to close on what Samet mentioned, with respect to lysocell, as always, obviously, we will update you as our discussion with the regulatory authorities progress." And I just think that's very, very odd. How would they update us as it progresses unless it's approval, rejection, or being deferred? And when I originally saw that, I thought that meant Giovanni saying, we're going to get a complete response letter and we'll let you know when that happens. I don't think that anymore, because if you read the next transcript of when they were asked about it again, this is what is said. This is what is said. Hold on. As we've said in the past, that the conversations with the agencies are going well, and we look forward to seeing hopefully the approval at some point to be able to bring to the patients as soon as possible. Again, for some reason, he likes to bring up the past. As we've said in the past, the conversations. I don't know if if you're supposed to mean that you're not supposed to think this is an updated guidance, but anyway, that's what he said. Then he wrote, "We'll obviously let you know as soon as we get the decision." The decision. Not the decision of whether they might defer PDUFA. So I just think that's interesting. We are not going to comment, obviously, specifically about the dialogue around inspections, et cetera. We're generally very happy with the dialogue that has been happening. Generally very happy. It just doesn't make any sense for them to stick their neck on the line like that and then 2 weeks get a CRL. They don't gain anything from this. So I don't think a CRL is coming. I really do feel pretty strongly about that. But I don't know why Giovanni decided to pipe in and say, just to let you know, we'll update you, obviously, as soon as the regulatory agencies tell us something. I would love to hear people's opinions about that, but I don't know why he bothered piped in about that. Let me see what other questions we have here. What if the FDA is waiting on the 483 response to determine if they need to inspect Texas? That's possible. I don't know if the outcome in Bothell should be that significant to the outcome in Texas. In fact, to make me even more puzzled, why in the 10Q did the lawyers decide to insert a line that said both the Bothell facility and the Texas facility are individual independent facilities, and they do not believe the Texas facility inspection is contingent on the outcome of the Bothell facility? They put that line in there. It makes no sense why they're telling us that, unless they want us to know that we shouldn't read anything into Texas not being inspected as a result of Bothell failing its inspection. Ironically, it could also mean that the Bothell might have failed its inspection, but they still think that Texas still needs to be inspected. I mean, of course, that's silly, but they purposely put that line in the risk section that, again, Bothell is completely independent of Seattle. Sorry, Bothell is completely independent of Houston, and you shouldn't read anything into the fact that they haven't inspected Houston. Correct. Everything here is about creating a consistent fact pattern that is unimpeachable in the face of scrutiny and litigation. I definitely agree they're doing that. Everything is definitely about looking this in the face of litigation. Heard FDA has an office in Dallas. They could easily drive down there. It makes no sense. Now, let me address that. Thank you, Thomas Pauly. I have been told that one of the two inspectors that went to Bothell is from Maryland. They were not both local inspectors. Okay. How I know that, I don't even know how to begin to tell you. I was told a third hand, but that one of the two inspectors flew there to Bothell. So you can still make the argument that they need one of the two inspectors at Houston to be from Maryland, the expert, and they can't send local employees in to Houston. And that's the reason why they're not doing it. Also, Dallas is far from Houston. You need to have hotel rooms, et cetera, for a few days. It would require a long drive. And look, they might think that, that plant is too dangerous to go into, which is ridiculous given the COVID levels on a regional level. Any chance if Lysol isn't approved for this indication that you could use it to help remedy your tiny dingus? Thank you, Kid Dynamite, for your very interesting question. No, I don't think that'll be an indication that Bristol works on in the future, repairing or fixing my tiny dingus. Richard, what a fucked up situation. Sigh, sorry for everyone. Yes, Richard, thank you. I agree. King Bobbers, if you didn't own any this is a great question. If you didn't own any BMYRT now, and if you're looking at this from fresh eyes today, would you buy it, and how much of your percent would your account be? Great question. So there's two things that you should try to do every day as an investor. And there's some caveats I'm going to tell you with this, but this is true for every investor. You should wake up every day and think your portfolio is clean, you own nothing, and would you make the same positions today that you made yesterday? The only caveat I have there is taxes is a huge slippage. So if you have long-term capital gains and a low-cost base of stock, or if you're about to get long-term capital gains, taxes is a real deal, and it definitely should be viewed upon in your portfolio at all times. Putting that aside, and I don't have any tax issues because I have, unfortunately, tons of net operating losses in my portfolio. So I'm not using taxes as any indication. I would not wake up today and make this position this size in my portfolio today. And I'll fully admit that. I have huge negative, cognitive dissonance here. And I would not be able to sleep at night if this gets approved and I don't own this position. I do think I would own this in a much smaller manner if I was looking at this with fresh eyes and taking a punt on it today. Maybe 1, 2, 3% position. So there's a complete disconnect between the position size I have on now and what I think someone should have on, or what I would have on, even someone that takes big bets, given how I feel about this right now. That being said, I'm very emotional about this. I might have been burned so many times by this that I'm taking an overly conservative, cautious view now in my mind about what the true odds are of approval. If I was looking at this fresh, I can easily make a there's a case to be made that everything I've thought in the past is still valid here, that the FDA still will do all it can to get this approved on time, that them sending a team into Bothell only confirms that they want to do all they can to get this approved on time. And it's more likely now this gets confirmed on time than it did back in September. Let's talk about why that could be. In September, we didn't even know they were going to inspect Bothell, right? They inspected neither, and they had neither scheduled. And I was confident they would either get inspected or they would waive the inspections. Well, you fast forward to today, and we know they did one inspection. The only thing we don't know is if they've decided to waive Houston. And why we're bearish, or why you could be bearish, is because the FDA hasn't told Bristol, we plan on waiving Houston. I can think of a lot of reasons why A, the FDA wouldn't tell Bristol that, and B, why Bristol, if they were insinuated that, they wouldn't tell us. Does the FDA really want to start getting out to all pharma that you don't have to worry about your facilities? Because don't worry, when the PDUFA date comes, we're just going to say, don't worry about it. We're going to inspect later. I think the FDA definitely wants people to be, aware that they might inspect, and they should expect that you're going to have your facility inspected before a PDUFA date. Again, they're just balancing, they're juggling so many variables here, and they don't want companies to start playing loose with manufacturing or not putting in the actual protocols, because they shouldn't expect a inspection come their PDUFA date. So, look, I still think this gets approved. I do. I think that we should talk about the read-through to Idacel, actually. That's just kind of important too. So if this doesn't get approved by its PDUFA date, what does that mean? And let's say it gets approved after. Let's say it gets approved between November and the end of December. The read-through for Idacel is so complex because Idacel is a first-to-market unmet need. And that doesn't mean the FDA is then going to take 4, 5, 6 weeks longer to approve Idacel. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason to that the FDA is going to say, now that we've learned how we're going to handle, remote virtual inspections or COVID-related inspections, that for a drug that has the PDUFA date, March 27th, we're going to wait until middle of May to approve. So it would actually be a really good buying opportunity if Lysocell gets approved in the middle of December, and this CVR is still only $3, because people think there's a very unlikely chance that that the FDA approves Idacel on time. I would make it a big position if that happened. I think it's more likely than not that over the next 3 months, FDA figures out virtual inspections better. They've even said they're planning on doing more virtual inspections. You could find on Twitter in a 60-minute Vimeo report about how FDA is going to virtual inspections, and they're trying to figure out COVID. So I don't necessarily think that you can read into anymore if this gets approved between the third week of November and the end of December. That means Idacel is more likely than not screwed. I would still put probably an 80-85% chance Idacel gets approved on time, even in that scenario, which I know sounds crazy. But so look out for that as an opportunity. I also think it's very unlikely the FDA approves in between the third week of November and the end of December. In fact, if that does happen, I think we would get a press release from Bristol Myers on the PDUFA date, and there would be detailed info in it. I think it would say the FDA has informed us they are deferring this action, and I don't think it would say until they can inspect. I think it will say to wrap up the review of the Form 483s and bring the conclusion to the entire document from the Bothell inspection, and that the FDA has informed us they plan on deferring the inspection. I think it's if they don't say that, if they say FDA has said they're deferring approval pending the inspection at Houston, and they don't give you any more color about when they plan on inspecting Houston, I think you probably could forget about it. I mean, I don't know where. I think the stock would trade between 50 and 75 cents, maybe 50 cents. Because I don't know why you'd have any optimism they're going to get Houston done. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Good questions. Giovanni chimed in because he knew Salmon was using old info on Texas. He wanted to point out that they would only update on approval. I think that's probably true. I believe sponsors can make the request for a virtual inspection. I don't know. No one has asked if the request has been made on BMY's end. I'll have to look into some info. That's a great question. Great point, Andrew. The consultant that said that the letters came in 60 days prior, he said that the purpose of the letters was for the companies to then push back and say, this is how we think you should rectify the fact that you can't inspect. And this is where there'll be a lot of grounds for lawsuits. So if Bristol Myers hasn't tried to get to accommodate this PDUFA date by pushing back against FDA and say we don't want to miss our PDUFA date, you should do virtual inspections. There's definitely a case to be made that they could be sued and we could win because other people have pushed back and they've won. They've won approval either without an inspection or a virtual inspection. So that's true. We have no idea if Bristol Myers has tried to get FDA to do virtual inspections. I'm just taking a drink of water. 1 second. Bill Hunter, I'm not reading that. Richard, can the vector be produced in Bothell? No, it can't. Balaji, we are generally very happy with the discussion with FDA jive well with the situation. We were very likely to get the PDUFA date missed in 2 weeks. It's a great question. I don't know because in the previous time, they did differentiate between outside of the need for inspections. We're very happy with the way everything is going. This time, he didn't say that. He didn't say outside of the fact that they have said we need inspections. We need an inspection in Houston, and we don't have it. We're very happy with the way it's going. You're right. This time he just said, generally speaking. But then you could say, why did he put the generally in? I mean, the generally could be we're pissed off that we can't get inspected, and if we can't get inspected, we can't get approved. Also, if they were pretty confident they were going to get approved in 2 weeks, why would he say we hopefully hope to bring this to market, eventually or sometime soon or something? I don't know exactly what the line was. That definitely wasn't, in 2 weeks. Orion Small. I'm not reading that. Andrew Coburn. I'm not reading that. Considering LISO is regenerative medicine, advanced therapy, and BTD, priority reviewed and deems it mission critical, doesn't this give more resources and time to approve LISO-cell? Actually, funny question. Sorry. Yes, it is regenerative medicine, and it is break designation. It is priority review. Doesn't this give them more resources and time to approve LISO-cell? I mean, at the end of the day, this drug is mission critical, pretty much however you define it. Though you can make an argument that because there's 2 on the market, it's less mission critical than ide-cel. It is probably it is the most mission critical drug that this division is looking at right now. They definitely have the resources to review this. But, the safety of their employees is the safety of their employees. So if they can't send somebody into that facility, it's not really about the resources. It's that they just won't do it. Again, I think the FDA knows what they're doing. I think they probably didn't send someone to Houston because they're planning on approving it without the Houston inspection. But then why didn't they do a virtual inspection? I mean, why didn't they try to do something, right? I mean, if you try to do something, if I can't go into my doctor to get a full exam, a full physical, but I have a mole that I want to look at, wouldn't I do telehealth to show them my mole? So it doesn't make any sense to me. It's not as good, but at least I would get an opinion. It doesn't make any sense to me why they wouldn't at least do a virtual inspection. And they still can do it, but then how do they get this turned around in 2 weeks? 2 weeks is a very tight time frame. Let's see what else we have. I've been wondering what the other drugs are at Texas plant that need to get inspected. Perhaps FDA is thinking about a combo inspection. There's not any other drugs in the pipeline right now in gene therapy or in CAR T that are pending approval. So no, I don't think that there's any other drugs right now there that are awaiting a PDUFA inspection. Also interesting, BMY differentiated between significant delay and delay. Like both of those are the options the FDA has discussed. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how the FDA indefinitely delays this. You probably don't get COVID to get back under control until what? I don't know. I mean, in San Diego, the numbers in COVID have been flat since March. They've literally had about 300 new cases, confirmed cases a day since March. So unless you think, Houston's going to get some sort of herd immunity, which I think is ridiculous, you're going to have a lot of cases all the way through the winter. And you're going to have that until the winter ends, or you get a vaccine. So, you'd have to assume that they want to delay this for many months or until they figure out, the virtual inspection situation. So I don't know. I don't know. Guidance from the FDA during COVID says they will inform if they cannot approve by PDUFA. What is the timeline? 1 day, 7 months? What is the timeline? 1 day, 7 days, a month, etc. Yeah, Matt, this is why I started the video. So I started the video with SPPI, and they got an email 1 day prior to their PDUFA saying they cannot inspect and they're deferring. So that is what has scared me. They did not let them know in advance. Now, the literature, the actual guidance says the FDA will inform the sponsor as soon as they know that an inspection is required and they will not be able to do it. So, that guidance to me is very bullish. If Bristol Myers was informed via email, we need to inspect Texas and we will not inspect it and we will not approve until we inspect it and we are deferring, they would have alerted the market already. It's hard for me to jive that with what SPPI is saying is that they didn't get a notification until the day before. Now, the best thing I can come up with is that FDA didn't know what they were going to do with SPPI. That was the first case that in the whole FDA that they deferred a PDUFA date for COVID. So maybe they were trying to figure it out there and they waited to the very end and that's what they decided. I don't know. But I think it's reasonable to assume that there is a 50% chance that the FDA figures out the inspection thing by this PDUFA date. And then there's, an 85 or 95% chance that, this is going to be approved outside of this inspection issue. To be clear, there's still a chance that they had a problem in Bothell. I was only at like 95% that this was going to be approved outside of inspections happening. So, there's a chance that something went wrong in Bothell. I don't think that that's likely given the language from yesterday. I mean, why would they spend so much time in the press release, in the risk section, at the bottom of the earnings press release, they said COVID-related delays could affect the decision date for Lysocell and Idacel. I think it's way more likely that they would have put something in the queue or in that press release that said in the risk section, inspection problems could affect Lysocell. Because by the time this queue came out, they've already had Bothell inspected and they would know if there was a major problem with Bothell. So they would have thrown a line in there, I would think, that said that, there could be manufacturing problems with Lysocell or Idacel. Everything's about covering their ass. So I don't know why they wouldn't put that in there. During the earnings report, BMY said Houston has to be inspected. Why would they say that if the FDA waives it? Good question. I don't think Bristol has been told at all that the FDA is waiving this definitively. If they told them that, they would have told us that this conference call. What I said was, I don't think it's in the FDA's interest to inform Bristol right now that they plan on waiving Houston. I said it earlier. You have to rewatch the now 43-minute video. God bless all of you for listening to me for 43 minutes. That the FDA, it's not in their interest to start alerting companies weeks or months in advance. Don't worry about your inspections. We're not going to make you do them. So I don't think they've been told that. I think the guidance doc you're referring to about ASAP notification says there's plants there. That's for plants with reason to believe there's a problem. This plant doesn't fall there, does it? No, it does say that. It says it in both paragraphs. In the second paragraph, it says, and I memorized it by heart. It says if the FDA deems an inspection is needed, but they can't do it, the case manager will notify the applicant. It doesn't say they'll notify it immediately. It says they will notify the applicant. It's the previous paragraph where it says if an inspection is needed and they can't do it, and as a result, they're probably going to get a complete response letter, then yes, they will notify them immediately. So that's in result of a complete response letter. Get you to read that bullish. It would mean that if Bristol was going to get a complete response letter as a result of not being able to inspect, they would be notified. But yes, that's true. It's a different language in both those paragraphs. It says it will notify the case manager. It doesn't say when they'll notify the case manager. At Kid Dynamite, good point. Please don't feed Kid Dynamite. He doesn't need to be told that 1 every 10,000 times he says something relevant. He'll never shut up. All right, are we done? I can keep answering questions, but people are still on here. I don't have any crystal ball. I think that just like I said, in previous YouTube videos, you have to assume that this is a zero, however you size it. I think that there's a very good chance this still plays out. And I assume we're still going to have fireworks to come. I have no idea. I would expect there's a very low likelihood in the next 2 weeks we get a press release that says they're getting rejected, they're getting a deferment. I definitely don't think we're going to get a press release that says they're getting approval. So really, the only bad thing's going to happen in the next 12 days, which is they're getting a deferral or they're getting rejected. Because if it's true that they haven't responded to the 483 yet, then clearly they're not getting approved in the next 12 days or 13 days. And that's not making me sell. I mean, the stupid thing is at $1.15. So we're not talking about it pricing in some, hey, look at that, Groupon went green. Awesome. By the way, I'm going to do a YouTube on Groupon in the next day or two or next week. Groupon is my favorite idea right now. And I think it's extremely likely the stock is 2, 3, 4, 5 times where it's trading at now in a year and a half, or it's sold. And I'm incredibly bullish on Groupon. So you can see a previous video I did, the second video I did, where I talked about Tiffany and Groupon. By the way, nailed Tiffany. You can see my thesis on Groupon, which hasn't changed much, but I would like to talk about it in more detail, and I'll do that in the coming days. But anyway, at $1.15, you're not underwriting much here. I mean, it's a very good setup. It's a very good setup going into the PDUFA date, and we'll see what happens. All right, there's still 2 more questions left. Can the FDA approve after inspection before Houston site responds to 483s? It's a great question. I don't think they're going to send people in to inspect the next 2 weeks. I mean, why would they send someone in this week to Houston if they were planning on getting this done before the PDUFA date? There is a case that happened in Europe in August where they inspected 2 weeks prior. They got 483s, they responded to 483s, and they approved on time. This happened during COVID. I don't remember the name of the drug. You can tweet at Sheep. He knows this situation. And yes, they inspected 2 weeks. It was like the second or third week of July. They did a multi-day inspection, and the drug was approved on time the first week of August. So there's precedent for this, but I don't know why they're going to send in people to Houston this week. It's not even scheduled. It's not even scheduled. So I just don't see that happening. If December 31st is narrowly missed, say January approval, would BMY choose to settle CVR at some value rather than go through litigation? Maybe. I would think so. I don't know. Why would it be approved in January? I mean, what scenario is the FDA deferring in November and then saying, you know what, guys, we really got to get this drug on market. COVID's not, settling. Let's approve without an inspection. It's possible, but I wouldn't bank on it. I mean, that would be it won't be zero. The CVR, if we get to December 31st and this drug is still pending, it has not been rejected, but still pending. That's a great question. This CVR will still be at least 50 cents. I really believe that. It won't be 25 cents or 10 cents because there will be litigation value and there'll be settlement value. So, your floor is basically 50 cents, I think, until Lysocell is rejected. You won't go below 50 cents. So yeah, you're risking 65 cents that this is approved between now and the end of the year. And you're probably only risking like 50 or 40 cents that this is approved between now and the PDUFA date. That's probably the right way to look at it. Now, in percentage terms, that's a huge downside from here, 50 or 40 cents. On absolute terms, it's nothing compared to what we've been dealing with, since yesterday. Someone said BMY would have a duty to their shareholders to settle at least expense possible. Would be ugly. We'll go through all pretrial motions, discovery. Yeah, they definitely don't want to see what happened behind closed doors. For instance, why did Lysocell get a major amendment and why did Idacell get an RTF? Clearly, there are some issues here regarding normal course of business and what they left out of these documents when they did their NDAs. Someone else asked a question yesterday. Do I know if the Bristol Myers employees still all own their CVRs? Well, of course I don't know that. It's my belief, my understanding that when you had options in Bristol, and when you own options in Celgene employee, I know you got the CVR. I believe it's non-tradable for them because they own options. So I don't know how their options would have turned into cash and then a liquid CVR, but it definitely could have been a liquid CVR, and it definitely could be in some brokerage account somewhere, and they definitely could be allowed to sell. So no, I do not know if the Bristol Myers employees own the CVR. In fact, on one of the private, that Cafe Pharma message board, some Bristol Myers employee asked, how do I sell my CVRs? And another employee wrote back, you have to call your broker. So no, they could have all sold all their CVRs, definitely. I mean, I don't think the board of director members and the CFO can sell the CVRs because he's got material non-public information. Also, most of the Juno employees probably have MNPI, but in theory, they could have sold them. Unless the options vested at close, highly converted. They did vest. Any option that was in the money immediately vested or converted to cash. It converted to the exact same thing you get as a Bristol employee. $50 plus, some sort of combo of package, just like it would if you owned options in Celgene. They are vested upon change of control, yeah. What are BMI's management obligations for reasonable efforts? For example, given current circumstances, is BMI management obligated to initiate discussion, try to resolve? It's a great question. So the documentation for the CVR says they have to operate under, I think, normal course. So yes, they are supposed to treat this drug and this CVR just like they would if it was their own drug that they cared about, like they would to get this approved. If they don't, for instance, ask the FDA to do this virtually, or if they didn't submit a letter trying to come up with a proposal for how to get this approved on time, they definitely, in my mind, breached due course. And you have precedent because litigants can go point to the other 5 people that did the exact same thing and show that as evidence that that is due course, trying to get your drug approved on time. So yes, they have a very good case to make. And look, Bristol Myers knows this. They know that they have litigation risk here. But guess what? $7 billion is a lot of money. $2 billion is much less, or $1 billion is much less. Unfortunately, if this goes to litigation, if this drug is not approved on December 31st, it is vastly more likely that Bristol Myers pays much less than $7 billion. Whether it's $2 billion, $3 billion, $4 billion, maybe they settle for $2, $3, $4 a share. That's a huge win for them. Billions of savings. So unfortunately, I don't look to see Bristol Myers doing the honorable or good thing, whatever that means, and delaying this. Like I said, I put it at 1%. The good news for CVR shareholders is I previously thought 2 different things were 1% odds. I thought the odds of Idacel getting an RTF was 1%, and it got an RTF. And I thought the odds of them not inspecting Texas, but inspecting Bothell was 1%. And they're not inspecting Texas. Now, that being said, I'm not wrong on the second one yet. If they do approve this on time and they waived the Texas inspection, I still consider myself right there. But I'm obviously very bad at my 1% risks. And so I think 1% chance that they change the terms of the CVR. Maybe they change it. SPPI situation. South Korea is on level 3 travel advisory. It's not the same thing as Houston, Texas. Doesn't that make it less of a real comp? It does, Eric. I think you might have missed the beginning of the YouTube. I wasn't comping it for why they won't inspect. I'm comping it about when they were notified, when SPPI was notified that they were deferring. That's the important part, not about the drugs being the same or about why one's more important than the other. The lesson learned on this investment is to be wary when incentives not aligned. Totally agree with that. Always been the reason why I didn't like this is that we're not aligned with BMY. However, most of this has been a result of COVID. The conspiracy theories that Bristol is going out of their way to sabotage this CVR, I think is nonsense. I think the major amendment and the RTF were just incompetence. There was nothing left out of the modules to purposely push these 3 months. I'm positive of that. Incompetence, though, could be good grounds for a lawsuit. for when you have strict deadlines. The COVID situation, yes, Bristol Myers does not have to go out of their way to try to help CVR holders to get this approved on time. They could do the opposite. I think that if it's proven in a court of law that there has been messaging from the CEO down to not cooperate with the FDA to get this done by the PDUFA date, it's felony malfeasance. So there's a lot of people that are involved in this process. So when the FDA sends them a letter and says, we are not going to be able to inspect, and please confirm to us, we're not going to be able to inspect and what we should do. It's hard for me to imagine that the CEO or COO is going to then tell the lawyer that's in charge of responding, let them know, we're cool. Let us know when you can inspect. We're going to be here. We'd like to save $7 billion. If that came out during discovery, that was their response, I think they'd be in a lot of trouble. So it takes a lot of collusion to have the conspiracy theory that they are going to drag their heels to save this money. Now, does that mean that they're going to be jumping up and down to get it done? Absolutely not. They're not going to be doing that. But again, the people that are involved in this at the weeds level all have CVRs. They're all Juno employees, and they all have skin in the game. So I think they're definitely trying to get it done. I need some more water. What's your best guess of the price after litigation of CVR expires? But the question you have to ask is, the CVR expired, but Lysocell hasn't been approved yet? There's two different outcomes. If Lysocell hasn't been approved yet and the CVR expires, I think CVR will be 50 cents. If Lysocell gets approved after it expires, I think the CVR might go to 75 cents or even $1. So it's actually a very good setup post 12/31. If Lysocell gets a CRL, the CVR goes to 10 cents, maybe 5 cents. You still have litigation for incompetence, but all the litigation goes away if Lysocell ultimately doesn't get approved. Final probabilities on possible outcomes. I have no idea. You must be coming a little bit late. I think there's a 25 to 50% chance this gets approved by the PDUFA date. I think there's less than a 10% chance it gets approved between the PDUFA date and the end of the year. And then there's probably another 30% chance it gets approved in the first 6 months of next year. That's the best I got as far as odds go. I think there's a 5 to 15% chance the drug gets rejected based on what's going on with Bothell. 5 to 15% chance it gets rejected. Do you think it was a tell BMY was confident not having to pay out on CVR when they did the Mayo deal? No, I don't think that they would have looked at it at all when looking at the Mayo deal. I think it's easy to read into that was a very large cash deal, and saving $7 billion that found money that pays for half of it is pretty cool. But I don't play into any of the conspiracy that they started discussing with, they started discussions with this deal going back to May and June, and they were in earnest in May, June, July. There is absolutely no way that Bristol Myers had insight into whether the FDA was going to inspect facilities in October, November, back in June and July, and said, we're going to save $7 billion. This is exactly the curve COVID's going to take, and this is a no-brainer for us to buy this. So no, I don't think it even entered into their discussions internally. The bottom line is both of these deals are, even though they're big, are rounding errors to a company of Bristol Myers size. They have the financial flexibility to pay the CVR, to not pay the CVR, to acquire $12 billion companies, to not acquire $12 billion companies. No, I don't think there's any tell there whatsoever regarding them buying that and thinking they're going to save this money. Any other questions? All right. Well, we made it an hour. Thanks for listening. And, I'll keep doing these as I think more information comes out and more things that I come up with. But I really appreciate everybody listening, and I really appreciate the feedback. And that's what makes this good, is the two-way. Again, I'm sorry for anybody that lost money off of my confidence. I don't get paid anything for this. And one of the things that's beautiful about, what I do on Twitter is I tweet all my position sizes and I tweet all my portfolio. And I think there's been a lot of schadenfreude already by a few people doing victory laps about "I told you so," when it's that's very rich to me for people that don't put the transparency out there that I do, and don't understand that when you get involved in something like this, there's definitely no certainty in any way, shape, and form. And even with Tiffany was the closest thing I got to where I told you I was pretty much 100% sure we would win. You can go back and watch the Tiffany video. I even said on Twitter last week when Tiffany closed, I definitely did not say that ever about the CVR. And I did say that there was great trades with the CVR. I thought that they were definitely going to refile, for instance. But as far as this being a guaranteed, $9 payout, I never said that. And that's what risk is. When you have a 5% risk or a 10% risk or a 25% risk, those are real risks, and they come true sometimes. So as far as the lessons go about portfolio sizing and everything, I don't take any lesson from this. I knew what I was getting into, and I sized it to where if it went to zero, my portfolio would be alive and well. In fact, I sold some of the CVR last week, and a month ago, even I sold some of it at two. I mentioned it in the last two YouTube ago. I said I sold it at 220 or 230 before the inspection happened because it simply got too big. As my other portfolio went down, I had to resize it a little bit, and that's what you have to do. You have to. One thing somebody did say on Twitter is you have to be able to survive. You can't size something to where you can't live to fight another day with your portfolio. And back in March with COVID, I was too overexposed. I had too much gross exposure. I took a huge hit, and I had to cut positions on the way down. I do invest in a way that's rather risky. I generally am overexposed all the time with delta overexposed with options, so that when markets take drawdowns, I can't add. I have to cut. And that's very risky. That's not a great situation to be in. You want to be able to add when markets go down, not cut. But it's worked for me. I've had very good returns over the last 12 years. So, and I've had some huge drawdowns, crazy drawdowns. I think I've drawn down more than 30%, 7 or 8 times since 2008. 7 or 8 times, my whole portfolio has gone down more than 30%. So, this is, I lost more than 30% yesterday. It was my second worst loss ever. The first one was back in SRPT back in 2013. So, there's no lesson. The lesson is don't listen to strangers on the internet telling you to buy stocks if that's, where you're coming from. Know what you invest in, and know your risks, and definitely know your risks, and know that anything could happen. You can own a stock and you can have fraud and it go to zero. So always assume the worst in an investment and have it sized appropriately. Anybody else here? All right, guys, take care. Thanks again. I appreciate it.